folks, I imagine if you took a survey of, if you took a poll, if you canvassed people for their comments on, say, just universities around the world, you'd really get daunting numbers about the two hot spots now at issue, Ukraine and all that is involved in that, and the Middle East. And Al Jazeera had a 3-man session on the matter of what must be done, what can be done. Is there anything like that question to be answered by academics? I just am amazed, the provincialism and the self-interested Scott Lucas of Dublin, I think is simply trying to curry favor with a tired effort to say me too with people who won't forget his contribution to the discussions. I've been in bull sessions or roundtable meetings, in my life, and there always seems to be, a clunker or two since then, anyway. But not like this one. Who mainly wanted to tell an expert who is underrated, I think, Chris, who speaks Arabic and has been there and has been the victim of one slamming door after another, because he speaks truth to power. He sometimes might bite his tongue and put food on the table, but he's one of these people who says what he thinks, and sometimes isn't able to solve problems, but doesn't decide simply to join a team with mindless bromides. That's what his fellow participant or adversary or what? This bellicose Irishman, Irish are not famous for solving problems in their own backyard, let alone around the world. But what does he want? To make a name for himself and be welcomed in more places than Birmingham, England? Whence he launched an attack on Chris Hedges or Hughes, whatever his name is, of Princeton and so on, Princeton, New Jersey. Chris is an honest man and does not attack. He doesn't suffer fools easily, but by that I don't mean he tries to attack them. And from the sound of this Lucas character, you would think that he really knows what's going on. He said Chris is simplistic, is counterproductive, all that, just off the top of his head, like he was ready to say all that, no matter what, knowing, I guess, that many people would say what Chris says is sometimes stating the obvious, which nobody yet has taken seriously. But I mean, I don't know. I've never seen. It's about like asking MLK and Malcolm X and George Wallace to sit down and have a discussion, and suddenly you start hearing from George Wallace, and the other two just have to, endure that. But Chris did say, well, wait just a minute, that's not right. And the guy just raised his voice and said, you don't know what you're talking about. You're simplistic. All Chris said was, what a lot of people know, and that is that NATO is a problem. It's not only that they broke their word with Putin against all kinds of advice, but also the way they broke their word was as if, well, we can do what we want, we calmly do whatever we want anyway, and did he object? Oh, how about that? Well, we've got an arms sale machine that's out of control, and we're getting money that is outrageous, mostly from the U.S. but also from others, and nobody knows how to bail the cat, and who's to blame nobody can say, although obviously it's mostly a U.S. operation. The U.S. wants to sell all it can, and if somebody starts a war, well, they're glad they can liquidate old stuff and ship all the old stuff to a war zone and crank up the factories to make a whole new generation of stuff after that. Why? Because the U.S. basically has a hollowed out economy that is leaning heavily on arms production and sales. It's embarrassing. It's like, figuratively speaking, the nation's leaders, duck behind the curtains and pop a few billion in arms sales before coming out and trying to act sober about world events. And then there are people like this lean and hungry Irishman, rather pitifully trying to curry favor. It reminded me, dare I say, of Hubert Humphrey's downfall. In the waning days of events back then. And since then, of course, we've had this gentle upswing into not so gentle diplomacy in terms of wars here and there and for decades and so on. Not exactly like Vietnam, but if you really take a look, it's rather daunting. Hubert Humphrey would, it seems, do anything to get elected in the honest belief that if he got elected, he could, stomp on the brakes and bring the juggernaut to an end in Southeast Asia, and yada yada yada. He really basically sacrificed himself to the notion that it was worth prostrating himself before the tired and worn out, useless crud that was still kicking, in Southeast Asia. All of that changed rather dramatically when Johnson said he would not run again, but the damn machinery was still going, and Hubert thought, I can do it, and wrecked himself. Well, at least in terms of one interview, it was amazing that this Lucas character, who happened to be in Birmingham, England, from Dublin, where he runs a center for some sort of a conflict resolution or something. Maybe he ought to stick to marriage counseling or something, a dubious trade of some distinction. Sometimes that helps, but not so often that people regularly turn to that before heading for a lawyer, I mean, it's great that some people might think of that, but most people just head for a lawyer, you know. And good lawyers can sometimes help and sometimes direct people to a counselor, you know, which is nice. But, you know, here you are with a character so provincial that it's just amazing. All he sees is that he's got to say, well, Putin invaded. It was not NATO that invaded. It was not the U.S. who invaded. Yeah, right. Real smart, you know. Next time you can get together, you know, Chris Hodges or Hedges or whatever on one side, and on the other side Malcolm X with George Wallace in the middle. You just see what kind of interview that would be. Come in. Hey, thank you. Appreciate it. Oh, some more favorites. All right. English peas.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, it's just, I'm emphasizing that because, you know, in his own way, he's important, you know. Not because he was put in front of the whole world to make a fool of himself, but because, you know, he really did say what a lot of people have to say. They will line up, you know, very easily with the U.S. and or NATO and against Putin without much effort, because they can't make much effort. It's a very feeble effort. And usually they don't get heard, you know. And we have some of that going on in terms of, shall we say, the rabble-rousers on center stage around the world talking about wokeness. I understand is a word that has come to mean that which must be condemned. That is, people who are, well, just, you know, not very helpful. And they might actually be worse than that. There are a lot of people like that, and somehow Al Jazeera put this guy in between the other two, and really I haven't seen Chris speak up, you know, as he did and push back against this guy much, because he's a gentleman who doesn't want to do that. And I wish I could say he's moved from one distinguished association to the next, but he has been slammed by people who run the Pat Boone type of expertise, you know. Nobody wants to, you know, say ugly things about Pat Boone, but, you know, he's not invited to offer his opinions too often because of what they've been. And of course they always say he's one of the smartest people in the world, and many people would vouch for that. No, Chris is not like that, but he's treated as someone who's not razor sharp and bellicose. But this little fella from Dublin tried to step on him, and he reacted. It's a heartache to know that Chris is perfectly willing to just say, well, I believe this, that, and the other, and the next thing you know, he's kicked off a network, or fired by the New York Times, or, you know, these kinds of things that hit pretty hard. Even though he speaks Arabic and has been many of the places where the man from Dublin probably couldn't find on the map, you know, and it shows. Well, I'm not saying that just learning a language like Arabic means that you're an expert. And when he's introduced, they say, well, former New York Times reporter and the author of many books, and the winner of a Pulitzer Prize. After a while, you need something good to do. And I hope I don't, do any harm by saying this, but it's pretty bad when you're invited to speak with a distinguished Chinese expert and a man from Dublin, and there was Chris. There's a person he reminds me of. There's a man who was elected senator from Alabama, who once, as a lawyer, nailed the bombers who threw explosives into a place, the Baptist church, where 3 young girls died. I knew the man, the dad who suffered that. He used to come to the branch library where I worked for a while, and I noticed he always, he just wasn't the same. Who could be the same after that, He was a very sad man, heartbroken, but he was a good man. A lot of people carry burdens like that. And anyway, the man who did that is another honest person. He speaks his mind with, he knows when to bite his tongue sometimes, but he's not that, he doesn't have that warrior instinct as a lawyer. He was able to ferret out what he needed to do. He was an able attorney and got the job done for that family, and for that matter, for all the people who were grateful to him. But he didn't have that politician's instinct, whatever that really is, who's to say. In fact, I would say that he has always had what I would call a judicial temperament. He's more like a judge than an advocate for one side or the other, and so he, practiced law for many years, and when things, when there became an unexpected opening, you might say, in the Senate for someone from Alabama, because Trump was elected, he was able to become a senator. But he was a dead duck because, of course, soon enough, the political machines wanted one of their own, a Republican, to get that seat that the Attorney General had left behind. Of course, the Attorney General in turn was fired because he had some pretty silly ideas. The senator was rewarded with a place in the cabinet as Attorney General because he was one of the first to endorse Trump for president. Well, he stayed there for a while and incensed Trump once too many times, and he was a dead duck. But in the meantime, his seat had been filled by the attorney who caught the killers in Birmingham, and of course everybody knew he there's hardly any way he could keep the seat, and he couldn't keep the seat. And I kept asking rhetorically, when will he be nominated to a bench somewhere? because he would probably be very good. Well, it hadn't happened yet, and of course now a former football coach is in the Senate instead, and that's really kind of the end of that story. And I don't know who would be in a position to nominate someone I could call, the former senator to a bench, but it seemed a shame, I guess that's because, nobody seriously thinks that he would be confirmed as a Democrat to sit in any number of places or something like that. But I hope that people are not hurt by my being candid when I say that Chris is that kind of person. Chris is not the kind of person, like any number of people who want to fight and will fight, And however, I think Chris would want to reason through problems and solve problems, and maybe some don't particularly like a more academic approach. Maybe for some he's into secular affairs that an ordained Presbyterian minister is not supposed to go unless black and Baptist. Or what? I don't know what to say. But, there's some people that just seem to be, unappreciated. Well, I appreciate Chris. I think he has a lot to say. Although I admit that, when you're running on empty, it's difficult. And I hope, if I say that about Chris, I hope he knows I don't mean some backhand across his face. That's certainly not my intent. But, to be interviewed by Al Jazeera and be up against some character from Dublin, and the Chinese fellow knew better than to, once he saw or heard from the Dublin professor, I noticed he didn't want to particularly say much. But Chris had already said something, and then all of a sudden this inflammation developed. Anyway, I've talked 23 minutes about that, and there's a certain futility, I think. Where would Chris go now? I've forgotten the particular point. It's one that you would expect. He said something, and the New York Times, which is not without its priorities, would not hear of it. And the same thing happened on a mixed media platform. Not only that, but they destroyed his entire catalog of episodes, which I think is a bit much. Or was that YouTube? I don't know. That's what happened to me on YouTube. But that I think there's certain people who do things like that here or there or whatever. Now that happened to me once with YouTube, and it was during a time when YouTube was under extreme pressure and had not gotten its act together. I remember that. YouTube had not gotten its act together, and yet they have, gotten their act together, but of course they have both hands in a firm grip on what? The tail of the video tiger. And they seem to be able to do all right, They say, if you hold on to the tail of the tiger, pretty soon you end up inside the tiger. Well, that hadn't happened to YouTube, and I think it's because Google can help out pretty much with, things that people don't talk about in terms of dealing with the pressure put on them. And, by that I mean mostly the individual people trying to game the system, and get away with something, and they've got some software that'll beat the hell out of anybody who wants to mess with their track record. They didn't have that when I got wiped out. What happened was there were some people that could do that, and they did that. Nowadays, well, it could happen again. I know it could happen again. That's the trouble we have now with this woke business. But you see, for several, Chris isn't suffering from this woke business. He's been sucking wind ever since he was clobbered by people a few years prior. And maybe there are people who have more to contribute nowadays because they're really in the thick of things and so on. But it's true what he said. He was in the thick of things, but that now has been quite some time. It's been even longer since I was in any kind of situation, even remotely like that. I never learned to speak Arabic. But, on the other hand, there's some people now who are wet behind their ears who are literally calling the shots. In fact, you can look up certain topics on YouTube and you'll find them. And some of them make good money too. I mean, they've got plenty of money. Chris writes books, and fortunately he sells a number of books, and so he's not going to starve or anything like that. But it's just a funny world, isn't it? When people choose the way they do. Unless people have slogans to offer and stuff like that. Now, some people say, well, now, why would you come to bat for somebody left behind? Well, I know what you're thinking. You probably got some pretty good answers. Answers that will persuade any number of people. The trouble is, sometimes that doesn't work too well, and Chris can point things like that out to others very well indeed. He's on the rubber chicken circuit. I think he has some good people, scheduling his travels and one thing or another. I think he enjoys his work. I hope he enjoys his work, meeting people on the campaign trail. And that trail is for people campaigning for informing people who are not following people who could just as easily be in soap operas confronting each other to match wits, about like Susan and everybody else. For years, because of Susan, the main thing on soap operas has been for people to stare at each other and glower and tell each other to shut up. Oh, it's all the rage. I don't think Chris wants to do that. But there are people like Chris who are left behind by all the soap operas and, politics and stuff is, if not soap, then detergent, I guess, or something, or elixirs of all kinds. Well, I've said too much. There I've gone and said too much again. Right about at 3 minutes, and that's more than enough on a subject like this. But I tell you, it just like it's getting to the bottom of the barrel when somebody like George Wallace is going to debate Robert Kennedy and the Dalai Lama. I don't like that, Or what else would it be? Jesus Christ and Santa Claus debating with Joe Pine. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Not a really good lineup, you know. So thank goodness Chris can turn a phrase and also enjoys talking with people and can travel around, and it's not as though he's standing in the rain. It's not like Janis Joplin, standing in the cold rain. But I'll be damned if some little twit out of Dublin is worth Chris's time, or the gentleman's from China, whose time I'm sure was diminished simply because I don't think he wanted to say much. I also met some people in Manchester more than once at one convention or another, and there's no point in talking about that. It happens every day. Magic is what it's been for a long time. You'll have fun. It's 31 minutes now. This frenetic effort. What is it? It's a 1:45 p.m. I got a tablespoon of English peas and 2 tablespoons of mashed potatoes and a biscuit-looking thing, and the rest is inedible. I won't try to tell you what it is. But fortunately, the debit card came to replace the one that was frozen, deactivated. It activated without a hitch, and I do have some other things to supplement the garbage. As for what I've had to say, unfortunately, you'll have to supplement your intake because I can't offer any better. I didn't learn Arabic, for example. Bye for now.